Hello and welcome back to Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. I'm your host, CJ Baumgartner, and recording this podcast on the eve of opening day. So you're probably listening to it as you're getting ready for the Minnesota Twins opening day. And if you are, happy opening day. It's one of the best feelings of the year. I think it's one of the greatest days in sports on the calendar. MLB opening day. There's so much fanfare. There's so much stuff going on. And there's just this renewed sense of optimism. I know in Minnesota, there's like still 3 feet of snow outside, but typically you'd look out and it feel like spring, everything's kind of coming together. But still a really fun day. The Twins are going to be playing in Kansas City. I believe that game is about a 3 o'clock start time tomorrow, 3:10. First pitch from Kauffman Stadium, Pablo Lopez versus Zach Greinke. And a little something interesting, the Twins have already announced their opening day lineup. They announced it like almost a whole 24 hours before game time. So let's break down what that opening lineup is going to be. Leading off, playing right field, Max Kepler, playing shortstop and hitting second, Carlos Correa. Feels so good to say that he's a Minnesota Twin. Number 3, the designated hitter, Byron Buxton. Left fielder, batting cleanup, Trevor Larnach. In the 5-hole, it's the third baseman, Jose Miranda. Nick Gordon playing second base and hitting 6th. At 7th, it's Joey Gallo playing first base on opening day. The catcher, Christian Vasquez, hitting 8th. And Michael A. Taylor rounds out Rocco Baldelli's lineup, hitting 9th. So that's the way the Twins are going to align themselves in game one. Now, again, as we've talked about throughout spring training, Rocco Baldelli is a guy who likes to use his lineups very much like the Tampa Bay Rays still do, but very much did back in the days of Joe Maddon when he was in the Rays organization of guys shift around, guys play different positions. So we're not going to read too much into this opening lineup, but hey, it's the first baseball related content we get. The one note, the thing that jumped off the page to me a little bit is Max Kepler hitting leadoff. Now, over the last few years, Max Kepler has been a leadoff hitter for the Twins and somebody that Rocco Baldelli really does like to put in that spot. I'm going to be honest. I don't know if Max Kepler's my leadoff hitter, but for Rocco Baldelli, he sure is. And again, if you're somebody who wants to show that, hey, man, the floor is yours. We're giving you every opportunity to play well this season after a couple mediocre seasons the last couple of years. Putting him leadoff on opening day is a way to do it. Of course, Max Kepler is leadoff at bat to begin the 2020 season in, late July, hitting that leadoff home run at Guaranteed Rate Field in Chicago. But again, Kepler, personally, I'd put him towards the bottom part of the order, although he's a guy that Rocco is like to put in that leadoff spot. Of course, Kepler can work the count, doesn't strike out a whole heck of a lot. So he's from that aspect, you can see why the Twins would put him in the leadoff spot. Carlos Correa, shortstop, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, let's say Ron Gardenhire's penciling in this lineup. Carlos Correa is your 3 hitter. But in this lineup, the way the Twins construct their lineup, they really do like Carlos Correa in that 2-hole. They figure if a guy like Kepler gets on base, that Correa can do a good job of knocking him in or at least getting another good at-bat. And then it sets the table for Byron Buxton in the 3-hole to really do some damage. So Carlos Correa in the playing shortstop, hitting in that 2-hole. He's going to be hitting. There's going to be a lot of shifting with this Twins lineup, and even with Carlos Correa. But really, I think the thing that you can almost bank on anytime Carlos Correa is in the lineup, he's probably going to be hitting second, at least until something drastic changes. I don't think Carlos Correa is a leadoff hitter. I think he stays more in that 2-3 role, but the Twins like to get a little wild and fast and loose with that lineup combination. So again, anything's on the table, but I think if there's anybody who you're to make a sure bet of like, yeah, this guy will play more often than not in this spot, the 2-hole is Carlos Correa's spot. So hitting third, Byron Buxton, and you can make the case for cleanup, but I think the Twins talked about the ABC lineup last season: Arise, Buxton, Correa. Now we're going to be seeing the BC a little bit here with Correa, CB rather, with Correa and Buxton. Those guys are almost always going to be back-to-back off each other, whether it's Buxton first, Correa second, in front, maybe is the better way to word that. Whether it's Buxton in front of Correa or Correa in front of Buxton, those two guys are going to be matched up on each other a lot. They're two great hitters, and hopefully there's people on base in front of them. But if not, Carlos Correa gets on base. Buxton, very good doubles and home runs hitter, can get Correa home. That's the thought there. I mean, Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton, the lifeblood of this team and the two dynamic stars in this lineup. You're really expecting a lot of production out of them. In the cleanup hole is number 4, in the number 4 spot, Trevor Larnach. Number 9 this year. Trevor Larnach came up into the big leagues in 2021, I think wearing 24, and then went into 2022 with number 13. And then now this season is, because I think Gary Sanchez, he bumped down to 13. And then now with Joey Gallo, he bumped down to number 9. So unless Ryan Domit's coming back, I think we're pretty good on number 9 being Trevor Larnach's number for the time being. But Trevor Larnach is a prototypical cleanup hitter. If you imagine Jason Kubel back in the day, stocky, big guy. I can't remember Jason Kubel's height, but you just remember him kind of being a more built guy, and then a lot of doubles, a lot of home runs. And that's the same thing with Trevor Larnach. He's a guy who's going to hit a lot of doubles, hit a lot of home runs. His strikeouts will be a little higher, but at the same time, he'll have enough production to kind of make you forget all that. And with Alex Kirilloff starting the season on the IL, it helped Larnach because it meant that Joey Gallo had to come into play first base. That opened up left field for Trevor Larnach to take that spot. So Larnach, a big season upcoming for him to really prove if he is a part of this Twins young core. I know for a while there, it looked like Larnach and Kirilloff were two of the big pieces in that core, but now it's Lewis and it's Brooks Lee and it's just all of these guys coming. It's Royce Lewis and Brooks Lee and Carlos Correa and coming together to form this infield. So again, there's a little bit of a make or break here for both Kirilloff and Larnach. We're really going to see Larnach have a chance to do things here. I think Larnach will be primarily shifted in that 4 to 7 spot in the Twins lineup throughout the season. Middle of the order, he's a prototypical guy who can do that. So if you think Trevor Larnach, think Jason Kubel a little bit. Maybe that's not the best comparison, but that's what I would use for Larnach. And again, pedigree guy, first round draft pick. Not a top prospect, not like number 1, but very high up on the prospect list for the Twins. Made his big league debut a couple years ago now, but again, injuries have kept him out for a lot of last year and the year before. So again, if Larnach can stay healthy, I really do think he can produce at a valuable number, but we'll have to see that. Jose Miranda hitting 5, and again, Jose Miranda will be slotted in that 4 to 7 hole a lot throughout the season. Anywhere in there, you could see Jose Miranda in that lineup. Going to be an important season for Miranda to see if he can take that next step up. Carlos Correa coming back challenged him a little bit. And I mean, even still, just Carlos Correa being here last year challenged Jose Miranda. And now that Correa is here as a mentor and as a guy to help push him, he's lost weight. He's came in strong, had a great spring. Jose Miranda. Now, it doesn't mean a ton spring training games, but still an encouraging sign to see that he's tearing the cover off the ball, even though he had that shoulder issue. Looks like he's ready to go. He's slotted to play third base. Didn't play a ton of third base in spring training due to that shoulder, but they're resting him then, so he's ready to go now. Nick Gordon hitting in the 6th spot. And Nick Gordon is a guy who could go all over the lineup. I expect him to stay more in that 6 to 9 spot. Nice little role for him. But at the same time, I think that you could also I think that if Nick Gordon hits well, and I think that if things go well for Nick Gordon, he might be able to sneak his way up into the top part of the lineup a couple times throughout the year. But I think that bottom of the order is where you want him. And again, Nick Gordon going to see a lot of plate appearances in the first couple weeks with Jorge Polanco starting the season on the IL, and the fact that Brooks Lee isn't ready for the big leagues yet, Ed Julian isn't ready for the big leagues yet, and Austin Martin is out for the time being with an elbow issue. So things have really opened up for Nick Gordon to take a lot of playing time. I know Kyle Farmer will get some starts as well, especially against left-handed pitchers. But for the time being, Nick Gordon is going to get a lot of at-bats at second base and a good opportunity for him to establish himself as a guy who can really play as a multi-positional player. He'll play second base one day. He'll shift over to third. He'll play left field, do all that kind of stuff. So for Joey Gallo, again, a season for him Hitting above 200 would be the goal, but don't be surprised if Joey Gallo has, at the All-Star break, has like 10 home runs and a batting average of like 175, because he's a guy who I think his career average is like at 200, or if not, it's really close to that, even under. It's more likely it's under 200 than over for that career average for Joey Gallo. He's Miguel Sano, who can actually play the corner outfield. That's the best analogy I have for Joey Gallo. And he plays a nice corner outfield, and he'll play a good first base, is what the going theory has been throughout spring training. But if for Joey Gallo, can he get back to that Texas Ranger form? Because him with the Yankees and even with the Dodgers, things fell apart for him really quick. So can he recapture that form? Joey Gallo being in the bottom of the order, towards the end of spring training, Gallo was getting some time at the top of the lineup, and he still might get there, but it's really interesting that they put him towards the bottom in this situation and put Kepler up at the top. So Christian Vasquez, the catcher, he's going to be in that 8-9 spot all season long, just riding in that catcher. He's a average defensive, or he's an average hitting catcher, average to above average. He'll be fine as a hitter, but again, his main bread and butter is he's a good defensive catcher, knows how to call a game, knows how to throw out runners. Him being in that 8-9 spot doesn't surprise me at all. He's hitting 8th. And Michael A. Taylor hitting 9th. Again, you're going to see Michael A. Taylor playing a lot of games with Byron Buxton starting the season at designated hitter, and Michael A. Taylor is going to probably be in that 9 hole. I think the last two batters of Vasquez and Taylor, that you could almost pencil that in every single time. Those are, again, we talked about spots. Everybody's going to change and move throughout different spots depending on who the pitcher is, depending on what lineup the Twins have that day. But also, if there's some things you can lean on, some things that you can almost pencil in, Vasquez and Taylor, when they're both in the lineup, are going to be 8-9 in some order. So when you kind of break this down, you have left-handed hitter in Kepler, and then right-handed hitter in Correa and Buxton, lefty in Larnach, righty in Miranda, lefties in Gordon and Gallo, and righties in Vasquez and Taylor. So a little bit of a balance. There's no 3 lefties or righties, but Twins trying to do their best against Zach Greinke to kind of mix it in a little bit in that opening day start. Okay, so now that we have the opening day lineup done, Pablo Lopez is going to be the opening day starter. I've told you my thoughts on Pablo Lopez being named the opening day starter on our last podcast. Go check that out. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Go check out, subscribe, give the 5-star rating, all that good stuff to Bombs Away. Really does help the podcast, and share it as well. Let your friends know. We're also on YouTube, by the way, so you can see this. I have in this very bad built-in laptop camera, I have the new Minnesota Twins road hats. I just bought it at Lids in St. Cloud earlier today, and I was really excited. Dropped more money than my wife probably wanted me to put in on a baseball cap, but here it is. It does look a little snazzy. I mean, I was not a huge fan of the new M, mainly just because I thought it was a little too basic. I'm not a huge fan of the North Star being in all the logos, but at the same time, it's kind of growing on me. And I thought, if it was the TC logo or the M logo, I kind of would rather have the hat with the M logo. I don't know why I came to that, but here we are. So this looks cool. And if you could read the sticker, it's like a 7 1/8 because I have the head of a child, apparently. So, insert whatever joke into the comments here. Anyway, there's a little bit of a call to mailbag I did. I didn't give a ton of time for it, so not a ton of responses, but at the same time, something I want to do throughout the season is that, you guys just ask questions on social media. Follow me on Twitter at BombCJ30. Follow the Bombs Away podcast at Bombs Away Pod on Twitter. You can also follow Bombs Away podcast on Facebook as well. Go follow those pages and just ask questions. So shoot me a DM, and anything about the Twins, love to answer throughout the season. So tried this first mailbag, maybe isn't the right word for it, but just question and answer period with some things that are going on with the Minnesota Twins. And with opening day coming up, thought this would be a good time to do it. So first question that came out, this comes courtesy of Sam G down in Louisville. Sam G, former coworker of mine. So let's see. He says, will our bullpen actually be competent this year. And interestingly enough, the Twins bullpen, middle of the pack. So, competent probably was the best, maybe not the best way, but what you could say is a way to describe the Twins last year in terms of their bullpen. It wasn't very good, the Twins bullpen. It was league average. It had an ERA of 3.84. So not ideal. When you look at in terms of all the playoff teams except for Philadelphia had a better bullpen ERA than the Twins. So they were good enough to have a bullpen that wasn't awful, which is tough to say. But I think if you actually take out all of the Emilio Pagan mess ups, I think this Twins bullpen looks a lot better. It's too bad the Twins decided to give him $3.5 million or whatever it was to come back. Still don't understand the Emilio Pagan move, but he's here, and he'll probably be pitching in some high leverage innings sooner rather than later. But in terms of the Twins bullpen, it's interesting because that's a unit that was middle of the pack last year, and they made no, and I mean like no improvements to that unit externally. They did not bring in a single free agent. They brought in a couple minor league free agents or non-roster invitees into spring training, but none of them came close to making the roster. And we talked about some of these Twins the Twins bullpen and who it comprises of as we start opening day. And it's Jorge Lopez, Yohan Duran, Griffin Jax, Caleb Thielbar, Emilio Pagan, Jorge Alcala, Cole Sands, and Giovanni Moran. That's the Twins bullpen. And when you look at the top end of it, it's great. When you look at Duran, Jackson, Thielbar, they are a really nice pairing trio at the top three. But if you look at, then it starts to take a step down. You get into the Jorge Lopez and Emilio Pagan, streaky, but when they're off their game are very detrimental to the Twins. We saw that with Jorge Lopez towards the end of the season, and we saw with Emilio Pagan in the middle of the season, how they both of them kind of sent things off the rails, especially late in games and in high leverage situations. So they're going to need to change that a little bit. Jorge Lopez came in to be the closer, and I don't know if that's his technical role right now. We'll have to see how the Twins approach it once we get into the late game situations. But right now they don't have a specified closer, and that's kind of been the Twins' mantra. They never really have had anybody in that type of role. Jorge Alcala is in this category of, can he stay healthy? Can he take that next step? Jorge Alcala was a fine pitcher. At the same time, he really does need to lower the home runs a little bit and really just be better in the clutch, I think is the best way to word that. His win probability added when coming into games was not ideal in 2021, and he really didn't have enough time to pitch in 2022 to get an accurate number. So he's got to work on those late inning situations, also lowering the home run ball, and both of those things kind of go hand in hand. So Jorge Alcala, I think, is a guy in the bullpen I think could really take a step up. I think if there's anybody who would have a breakout year, not like the Duran year where they become the best reliever in baseball, but maybe like a Griffin Jax year where they break through and everybody goes, oh, all right, well, this is a guy who didn't really have a ton of an idea what they were going to do, and now they're an important part of this bullpen. And I think Jorge Alcala can be that piece. I've been a Jorge Alcala fan for years, since basically he came over in the Ryan Presley trade. But anyway, Cole Sands getting that last spot in the bullpen as a long reliever. He's a guy who, again, he's a long reliever. He'll come in if the starters can't pitch a ton of innings, and he'll throw a bunch of innings, and then he'll probably get sent back down to AAA, and somebody else who the Twins can use in long relief will get called up, like a Josh Winder or something like that. Giovanni Moran is the other lefty in the bullpen. So you have Caleb Thielbar, the Twins' main lefty, and then you have Giovanni Moran, who's the lefty that the Twins would likely use if they have when Caleb Thielbar is pitched the night before and can't really pitch 2 days in a row. Giovanni Moran has a lot of upside. I think based off what I saw last year, there's a couple hiccups throughout the way, but I think Giovanni Moran can be a highly useful lefty coming out of the bullpen. And I think just the way he throws really will help the Twins in those late game situations. So I think the bullpen will be better than last year, but again, it depends on a couple things. One, what is the improvement like this year for Jorge Alcala and for Jorge Lopez? And the second part of that question is, how much are they going to lean on Emilio Pagan? Because the more they lean on Emilio Pagan, the worse this bullpen will be. I'm staking my claim to that. A lot of people said last year, hey man, Emilio Pagan isn't that bad of a pickup. And then as the season went on, it just kept looking worse and worse and worse. I get his stuff is really good, but man, Emilio Pagan sure ain't it. Sure ain't it. So I think the Twins bullpen will be better than expected. But again, are they going to be better than last year? Are they going to be better than middle of the pack? I think they will be. And I think the other reason is because the Twins starters are going to pitch deeper into ball games. And that gets us into our next question. This comes from Dan, and he says, will the Twins trust their starting pitchers a little bit more? Will they go deeper into games? And we talked about this on the last podcast where we talked about Sonny Gray's comments and how he said he wanted to pitch more, and it was a little bit of a team thing and a little bit of a Bundy and Archer were just kind of content with, never named Bundy and Archer, but I'm just assuming, kind of threw those guys under the bus and said we had people last year who were content with 4 or 5 inning starts, and that shouldn't be the goal. The Twins starting rotation is much better coming into opening day than it was last season. Much better. One, there's no Bundy and Archer, and two, Ober should be on this roster, but at the same time, he's in AAA. Now, you could say, is Ober better than Maeda? Maybe, maybe not. I would say Ober probably is at this point, but both of them haven't really pitched a lot in 2022, so we're kind of going off 2021 and kind of the hope and upside and whatever. So the Twins starting rotation is better, which means they're going to rely more on their starters. I think that's clear and obvious. Doesn't mean that they're going to pitch 7 innings every night, 8 innings. No, but I think it means that they're going to get past the 4th inning a lot more than normal. We might not see that early on in the season because it's April and teams are very cautious with their starters at the beginning of the year. The Dodgers had Clayton Kershaw throwing a perfect game against the Twins last April, and Dave Roberts took him out midway through the game because gotta rest my starters. So, the Twins aren't the only team that does it, but I think this Twins team will, once the season gets into full swing, rely on their bullpen to get 5, 6, 7 innings, depending on the situation. And the reason that the bullpen was bad or wore down last year is, one, because people got hurt, but also because the way that the Twins built their bullpen of, we only want guys to go 1 inning at a time. And especially when you have guys only go 4 or 5 innings, you need 4 or 5 innings out of your bullpen every single night. And it just wears on guys. And especially if you have a guy who doesn't have a good outing. So if you have a guy who you expect to get 1 inning and he can only get 1 out and gives up 5 runs, well, now all of a sudden everybody has to move up in the line. And now you're out of whack on that. You're probably losing in the ball game. And now you're putting yourself in a disadvantageous position for tomorrow night's ball game. So I think the Twins have to change their approach in terms of the bullpen and have to change up how they want to do that and how I've talked about it a lot last season. I'm not a particular fan of the 1 inning guys and the short starts. If it works, it works. I get it, but that's not the way I would do it. Let's just put it that way. Okay. All right. We have a whole bunch of questions here to go down. This one, it says, why is Kepler the leadoff batter? And kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. He's a guy who's led off a lot for Rocco Baldelli throughout the season. Throughout the years, and last year only had a handful of starts in the leadoff role, but again, that's also because you had the ABC lineup. You had Arise, Buxton, Correa, and Arise being a better hitter and being a lefty really didn't give Kepler much of an incentive to be in the 1 spot. So I think Kepler's in the 1 hole because it's comfortable for Rocco Baldelli. It's his comfort food, and I think that opening day is a good way to kind of show that you have faith in Kepler to have a good season, or at least putting your best foot forward. So if things go south with Kepler production-wise, you can say, hey, man, we've put you in the positions you're in before. We're not shaking things up on you. You got to produce. So our next question, I should say, that we have here is Buxton going to be the designated hitter long-term? And yes and no. I think Byron Buxton will be the DH, the main DH for most of April. They're slowly trying to ramp him up after the knee injury, and I'm fine with slowly ramping up Byron Buxton if that means he's in DH. Again, Byron Buxton at DH is better than Byron Buxton not in the lineup at all. I would love to see Buxton in center field. You get way more production out of him in center field. At the same time, Michael A. Taylor is a former Gold Glover. He knows how to play the position. So it's not like the Twins are throwing Celestino out there or Nick Gordon out there or making Kepler shift over from right to center field. At the same time, Buxton is so dynamic. I really wish that the Twins could get him in there more, but the Twins are doing it because Buxton's shown he can't stay healthy. So I think, is Buxton going to be the DH long term over the entire course of the season? The answer is probably not, but maybe. I think there's a stronger chance than we all think that Byron Buxton, let's say down the line, the Twins win the American League Central and they're in the postseason. And game one of that postseason series at Target Field, Byron Buxton's your DH and Royce Lewis is your center fielder, which I think is something that is totally in play if Royce Lewis comes back and shows the semblance of what he had when he got called up last season. If he can do that, I think the Twins would love to have him in center field for this year and have Buxton be the DH. Now, that's if all goes well. But again, I think the Twins would love to, because you can always move Buxton around. You can always put him in there in different spots. But I think that having him at DH and having Royce Lewis in center field isn't the dream lineup, but I think that's a situation that the Twins probably have had a lot of conversations about inside Target Field, and I could totally see it based off how the Twins have done things the last couple of years. And I wouldn't even hate it because that's a good way to get Royce Lewis in the lineup, especially if Polanco's back and healthy, Miranda's playing well at third base. There's just nowhere to put Royce Lewis because Carlos Correa is at shortstop. So the only real spot for Royce Lewis would be center field if Buxton is the DH. And again, because Michael A. Taylor is a fine center fielder, and I mean fine isn't like he's fine as a center fielder. He's a good center fielder. And at the same time, Byron Buxton's just better than him currently at playing center field. So to lose that production kind of hurts. And the fact that Michael A. Taylor is nowhere near a hitter that Buxton is. Michael A. Taylor is a nice player. He'll be a good player for this Twins team. But still, again, nowhere near Byron Buxton in that respect. So yeah, we could see Buxton playing DH a lot this season. It could happen, not ruling it out, not by a mile, but I'm not ready to buy into that theory quite yet. All right, so number 3, did they choose the right starting pitcher? Gonna guess this means for opening day, and that means it's Pablo Lopez. And I think Pablo Lopez is the guy you go with in that situation. I talked about it on the last podcast, how you gave up Luis Arraez. You gave up the batting champ to get him. You gave up one of the most popular players on the team, and for you to stash him as like the third guy in your rotation, not that it matters a ton to the Twins, but PR-wise, it does matter that if you went out and made a big trade for this guy, you need to put him front and center of your rotation. And not only that, I mean, that's just the obvious elephant in the room. But the other elephant in the room is that Pablo Lopez is a good pitcher, had a good spring, and also had a really good World Baseball Classic. And with the talent of Pablo Lopez on display for everyone to see, it's pretty obvious that he's the Twins pitcher with the highest ceiling, I think, out of all of these guys. You could go Sonny Gray as an alternative because he's the veteran. He's with the Twins already. He's that rotation leader in the clubhouse. But I think if you're going off which Twins pitcher is the most talented, it's got to be Pablo Lopez. If you're going off which Twins veteran is the most accomplished, then that's Sonny Gray. But I think Pablo Lopez is the right guy. His fastball's good, doesn't throw it for a ton of heat, but knows what to do with it. His changeup is the real kind of anchor pitch for Pablo Lopez. His changeup is not Johan Santana level, but the closest thing we've had to Johan's changeup since Johan Santana. All right, other questions in this mailbag, this Q&A edition of Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. Who will be the best reliever on this Twins team? So Yohan Duran, I think, is the Twins' best reliever, and I think he will be. I think the Twins will rely on him a lot this year, whether it is as a firefighting position. I know Aaron Gleeman wrote about this and said that he could potentially be the closer at some point, or at least he can envision him going into that role, and I wouldn't hate it. But at the same time, we'll see how far the Twins get away from that multi-inning firefighting situational type role that Duran is in. But I'm going to twist the question on this person just a little bit here. Who will be, I'm going to say which reliever has the best chance to break out and have that Yohan Duran season where they come out of nowhere and become a really, really effective piece for this bullpen? Well, and again, maybe Duran isn't the best case scenario, but maybe we could say more like Griffin Jacks, a guy who comes in, doesn't have a lot of expectations, but by the end of the season is a key piece of the Twins bullpen. I think that could be Giovanni Moran. I think he's got some stuff that really can get you excited about. He's a second lefty. He's 25 years old, had an ERA of like 2.3 last year in very limited action with the Twins. But I liked what I saw in Moran, and I think that he can be a valuable second lefty out of that Twins pen. And again, depending on how good that Thielbar does this year, depends on how much they're really going to lean on Moran. I don't think they'll lean on him a ton early, but I think that he'll show that he can be relied upon, not in every high leverage situation, but I think slowly he'll gain the trust of Rocco and the front office as the season goes on. Giovanni Moran. Next question. Did spring training make you optimistic for the season? So I'm going to say I was already pretty optimistic for the Twins coming into this season. I think I've already said that this team is good enough to win the division, and I think this team will win the division this year. That's my prediction. The Minnesota Twins will win the division. I think they'll win it with 92 games. I think that's a good number to put these Twins at. There's a lot of peaks and valleys with this Twins team, and I have an article coming up for Zone Coverage. Watch out for that, talking about some what-ifs on this Twins team, and I've talked about it throughout spring training. The Twins have a lot of what-ifs on their roster, or maybe ifs is the right word. If Kirilloff and Larnach stay healthy and contribute, and if the starting rotation depth holds, and if Max Kepler and Joey Gallo play well in this first year without the shift, and if, if Carlos Correa hits better with runners in scoring position, if Byron Buxton stays healthy, might be the biggest if everybody relies on every single season. There's just a whole lot of that floating around with the Twins, which means that there's a high ceiling, but also a low floor. We don't quite know. There's no real assurance with this Twins team. So I would say the spring made me optimistic in the sense that Jose Miranda looks like he's doing just fine, that the Twins pitching is going to be able to hold them in ball games, especially early in the season. Optimistic for some of the young prospects like Ed Julian and Brooks Lee, who I thought had good spring trainings, So I think I was already optimistic coming into this season, but I think spring training did reinforce that narrative that I put in myself. Next question is a little bit lighter one. What uniform are you most excited to be seeing the Twins play in? And I'm wearing the new road cap right now. So I think it has to be the new road uniforms are my favorite. I'm so glad they brought the block letters back with the gray jersey and the pinstripes. Now these ones are blue. The old Twins ones were black, but I am so excited. And there's the big, bulky red and white and blue stripe down the side of the pants. These Twins uniforms are a little corny, but I really like them. I think the only one is the Twins main uniform, the main home one. It's white and red. It's a little candy, like a candy cane, little candied. I wish that maybe there was just a little bit of blue trim on the Twins, but that's a nitpick. I really do like these Twins uniforms. The cream ones are fine. The Twin Cities one. I'm not a huge fan of the cream uniforms, but at the same time, they're fine. Like, I don't actively hate them like I did not like the red Twins uniform. So I'm glad they moved away from that. And then there's the solid navy blue with the white Minnesota across the front. I hope that if the Twins could roll out with any uniform tomorrow, I hope they roll out with the new navy blue caps with the M on them, and they have the gray pinstriped uniform for their road unis. I'm super excited to see them, and I hope that that's what the Twins roll out with in their opening day, again with the full rebrand and Target Field being renovated and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of changes. The video board is now bigger, and it's all video board. There's no like just single ads on the side of the board. It's all video, and I'm guessing that is ad related, and that way you don't that way you can put different ads in. You're not stuck with the Bally logo all season long. You can kind of keep it on a rotational basis. Of course, the Twins also had to get the new mini, and they had to get a new Mini and Paul behind home that's in the batter's eye or just above it, because the Twins got rid of the old font. So like if you're watching the video and you can see behind my left shoulder here, That's what the Minnie and Paul logo looked like. And instead they're going even further. So they're going back to the 1967 logo where it says Win Twins behind Minnie and Paul shaking hands over the Mississippi River. That looks really cool. Couple new video boards along the right field line that looks sweet. Bunch of Twins beat writers got a chance to tour Target Field. Go check out their Twitter pages. Doe Park for MLB.com. Had a whole bunch of pictures that were really fun to see. Bought a lot of tickets on that Carlos Correa deal where you could buy the standing room tickets for $4. Going to be heading to a lot of games this year. I'm going to drive my wife crazy. But we bought up tickets for a bunch of weekends and are going to try and go throughout the season. Okay. So last question I have for the Twins Q&A. Are there any prospects that you hope to see get playing time this year? So which prospects do I want to see, or at least hope to see, get a lot of playing time? It's a good question. Because I haven't, I want to say that there's some pitching guys because technically is Louis Varland still a prospect? I'm going to say yes. Love to see Louis Varland have a chance to get up and prove himself in the big leagues, of course, being the Minnesota guy, NSIC guy playing for Concordia St. Paul. Of course, I'm a Bemidji State guy. We don't need to talk about their baseball season right now. That's not, it's not ideal. But anyway, I'd like to see Louis Varland get a chance to prove himself up in the major leagues. Another prospect, I'm really excited to get a chance to see Brooks Lee at some point when he does break through and get into the majors. Brooks Lee probably is number 1 on a bullet, and then Royce Lewis number 2, but we've already seen him a little bit. I want to see if he can keep going. And you can't ride the momentum of last season, but at least prove that it wasn't just he had a great 2 weeks of hitting, that he actually does know how to hit big league pitching and it's going to turn out well. But Brooks Lee, man, Brooks Lee is what they're basing this franchise around, or at least they're very excited to base the franchise around him. So Brooks Lee, Royce Lewis, kind of that young core, and to get a few guys around him. But I think Brooks Lee is somebody who they used a lot at shortstop in spring training when Carlos Correa was gone, when his kid was born and out for a couple weeks. So I think that Brooks Lee could potentially be a shortstop when Carlos Correa has to slide over to third base at some point in his career. But even then, I think Brooks Lee is somebody who I think will have his big league debut for the Twins at some point this year. And I'm very, very much excited for that day. All right, well, I think that's been enough of some mailbag, and we also talked about the Twins opening day lineup. I think that's pretty much it. So I'm going to have my team predictions here. We already talked about their record. I think they're going to have 92 wins on the season. I think that's going to be good enough to win the American League Central. I also think that the team MVP this season is going to be Byron Buxton. I think he is going to be the team MVP. It's not necessarily a home run, but at the same time, I was going to say Carlos Correa, but he was the team MVP last year. I think Buxton, not going to say finally turns things around or finally plays over 100 games. I just think Buxton will be the team MVP, and we'll see that throughout the season. If we're going to go the team's Cy Young, I'm going to go Pablo Lopez. I think Pablo Lopez has a very, very high ceiling on for this team, and I think getting him out of the NL East will help a lot, and playing more teams in the AL Central. I know the schedules have balanced out a little bit, but you're still going to have to play a lot of Guardians and White Sox and Royals and Tigers more than any other team still. So that's another positive for Pablo Lopez. I think he'll be the team's Cy Young Award winner. The Sneaky Good Player Award, which is somebody who's just going to come out of nowhere and play super well. I got to think of a better name for that, like a Twins player who came out of nowhere and played super well. And I think for this, I've been kind of going back and forth on who I think it's going to be, because I think there's a good case that you can make Nick Gordon. I think there's a case that you can make Ryan Jeffers playing well. I think that there's a whole bunch of different avenues you could go down, but I think really throughout this year, I think it will, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to go with it. I think it will be Nick Gordon. I think he's somebody who I wasn't a huge, I didn't necessarily know what he was going to bring, but it looks like Dave Popkins and him, the hitting coach for the Twins, have finally worked out some approach at the plate, and it's worked out for them. So I think Nick Gordon can be that surprise player for the Twins. We'll check back in on this and we'll see how right I actually was, because my predictions, if I was in the predicting business, I would be living in a mansion, not doing this in a spare bedroom. But I digress. We're still having a lot of fun doing this. Opening day is upon us. The big league season is here. Let's go, everyone. Excited for a full season covering the Twins for Bombs Away, a Minnesota Twins podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. We'll catch you next time.